bring in now Professor Bonang Mohale. He is the President of Business Unity South Africa, representing much of formal business in South Africa. Professor Mohale, I appreciate your time. I know you'll be watching this with us tonight. How important is tonight's speech? Obviously, for many years, business has been wanting structural reform in the economy. Do you really expect that to happen this year?
So, in a context of a country that is literally in flames with the lowest levels of confidence, hope and trust, in order to achieve regulatory certainty and policy stability, I think what is needed from the President today is a new social compact or a grand pact where all of us are going to commit to say we don't want South Africa going over the precipice. So at the moment, the President is sitting with at least 3 reports. Therefore, as business, we expect an urgent implementation of the Zondo Commission report number 1 and 2, whilst we are still waiting for report number 3. We are also expecting the implementation of the expert panel's July insurrection report. But also, the President has started a process of the appointment of the Chief Justice, and we want him to finalize that process to send a strategic message that says South Africa is open for business. Instead of new promises, we expect the President to come with practical and pragmatic steps for the execution of the economic reconstruction and recovery plan, in particular a focus on infrastructure investment. We have to fix Transnet and Metro Rail because that's how the majority of our people go to work, but also the backbone of our infrastructure for the movement of goods and services. That's currently the 3rd commodities boom in the world. We are unable to participate because we don't have the capacity.
Professor Mohale, I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir. We're just, of course, seeing the Deputy President, David Mabuza, being greeted by the speakers of Parliament and the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. Professor Mohale, you're making the point of how important infrastructure is. In some ways, perhaps the big challenge is to protect the infrastructure we already have.
You see, there was no expectation for us to even build new infrastructure. The least we should have done is to maintain what we inherited from the apartheid government. There were trains, there were stations, and today none of those are actually alive and indeed visible. 13.5 million of our people every day are transported by taxis, which are not subsidized. Is it because they are owned mostly by black people? I think we also need to bring back government capacity where it was purposefully, deliberately and consciously hollowed out. We need to focus on small and medium enterprise development because that's where more than 60% of the new jobs are created. Whilst I'm at it, remember 90% of all the jobs are created by the private sector. We need to complete the vaccine rollout and in particular address this notion of hesitancy. We need to urgently address youth unemployment because at 74.9%, not only are young people of military age sitting at home twiddling their thumbs and doing absolutely nothing, we are inviting trouble and actually asking for it. So what we saw in July, rampant looting, is going to happen again until and unless we address this with the urgency that it needs. So private sector initiatives like the South African Youth.mobi initiatives, where currently we've got 1.2 million young people, giving them requisite skills to match the vacancies, whilst we are accelerating towards 3 million young people being placed in employment by 2024, I think are absolutely laudable. But we have to prioritize economic growth. Please go ahead, sir.
We know what needs to be prioritized, but there's always the accusation against yourselves as business, the private sector, that you are, to a degree, still sitting on a lot of money that could be used to help the economic situation in this country. What is your new commitment for 2022? What else are you going to do over and above what you've just outlined to help this country's unemployed population in particular?
I think we need to ask ourselves a question that says, why is foreign direct investment going to Europe where there's only 1% interest rate when they could get 8 to 9% interest rate in South Africa? It's precisely because we don't have regulatory certainty and policy stability. There are lots of projects where the private sector said, here's money, but help us to be able to implement it. We have said the lawlessness that has now become an epidemic actually is seeing the reverse, where most people are saying, once our factories and warehouses have been banned, like Samsung, we are not rebuilding in KwaZulu-Natal, where there is Amadela Ngobona been operating for the last 3 years with absolute impunity, and the security cluster that is meant to protect the South African citizens is nowhere to be seen. I think we also need to fix the more than 740 state-owned enterprises and state-owned companies, because that's where a little bit of the capacity can be there. Reduce government debt, reduce public sector wage bill.
Bonang, Mohale, stand by for us. We're just looking at pictures from the streets of Cape Town. This is, I believe, the city center. We're now seeing police officers on horseback making their way, accompanying one of the larger motorcades making their way. We're not going to say yet. We don't know who this is in this motorcade, but we're expecting in the next few minutes to see the president of the country, Cyril Ramaphosa, arrive to deliver the State of the Nation address. And as he arrives, Bonang, Mohale, you were talking about the issue of state capture. Have you, as the private sector, as business, fully and honestly grappled with how complicit you were in the destruction of SOEs?
In fact, this is a big blight on the reputation of business. And as the private sector, Zondo had some choice words for business that, in fact, some of our own named have been complicit in agitating and orchestrating, aiding and abetting state capture. And our response as business is to say, to restore our own integrity, our own reputation and credibility, we are going to work just as hard, just as passionately
All right,
for those